Today's video is going to be a little different from my regular format. For those of you that are familiar with my channel, I'm going to be a little more personal in this video and talk about the pain that I experienced in my experiences with narcissistic abuse. And the reason I'm going to do that is to help anybody out there that's going through the same thing to know that they're not alone and that recovery is possible and you're not going crazy, and also to help explain what this pain means, where it's coming from, and some ways to help cope with it. Welcome to Looking Behind the Mirror, where we explore narcissism and take our lives back as we make sense out of nonsense. As a quick disclaimer, everything I say is based on my opinions and my personal experiences. I'm not a professional, and if you're really struggling, I encourage you to seek professional help. I am providing links below for you. I want to preface this video with a little bit of an explanation of my own experiences with this kind of pain. So before I describe the pain that I've experienced and how and when I overcame that pain, I think it might be helpful if I first explain my opinions and beliefs as to why I felt that pain and in what situations I didn't. I usually try to shy away from personal experiences, but I just felt like I needed to create this video. I thought it might be helpful for anybody out there that's going through this, and I realized I haven't really gone into depth about this specific kind of pain, and I think it's really important because, at least for me, this was the hardest thing to overcome, and this was what made me feel the most alone. So in my opinion, the extreme amount of emotional pain that I experienced was a result of a trauma bond. And I have some videos where I go over what a trauma bond is. I don't really want to spend a ton of time in this video explaining what trauma bonds are, but basically it's just an inconsistent relationship in which you spend a lot of time feeling unsafe, fearful. You spend a lot of time wondering what's going to happen next. You spend a lot of time under a lot of stress. And then sometimes, inexplicably, the person that's abusing you or causing this trauma bond is nice to you, shows you affection, or are otherwise kind or giving you positive feedback. And in a trauma bond, this is totally unpredictable. There doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to it. And these moments where you're getting this relief, where you're feeling like things are okay, and maybe the abuser smiles at you or laughs at your joke or shows some affection, these moments become so euphoric compared to the constant stress and fear that you're under that you actually get addicted to chasing after these moments of euphoria. So just being treated like a normal person, being treated with basic decency, becomes a euphoric experience that you actually become addicted to. And when you break off these relationships with people that you're trauma bonded to, it can be extremely, extremely painful. And just like a drug addiction, the only way you know how to relieve this pain is to chase after these moments of euphoria, but you can't do that anymore because you've broken off the relationship with the only source of relief that you've come to know. So you have to find new ways to find relief. You have to find new ways to cope with your emotions, and that takes time, and that's where all this pain comes from, in my opinion. I also want to share my experience with the first abusive relationship, the first romantic abusive relationship that I was in was when I was much, much younger. It lasted for a couple years, and that relationship was so bad that I didn't really seem to form a trauma bond in hindsight. When I broke that relationship off, I didn't go through this pain that I'm going to describe in this video. I had the reaction that I think society would expect from an abuse victim. I think society, or people that haven't experienced and don't understand abuse, they expect an abuse victim to just feel relieved when they get out of an abusive relationship. A normal person that doesn't understand abuse would expect an abuse victim to just feel like, oh good, no more abuse, oh this is great, life is wonderful. I think that's what people would expect, and that is pretty much what I experienced in that first abusive relationship that I was in. I mean, there was definitely some trauma, and there was definitely a time period where I had to kind of pull myself back together, but it was absolutely nothing compared to what I experienced later in life. And I really think it's because in that first relationship, it was so bad that there really weren't any of those moments of relief. There really weren't any moments of affection, of smiling at me, at kindness. And I mean, I know that might be hard to believe, because I have to stop and think, well, surely there must have been some good moments, or why was I with that person? But I really think the good parts of the relationship existed mainly in my imagination. There really wasn't much to miss. There really weren't any good moments that weren't at least overshadowed by cruelty and meanness and coldness. And I really think that's why I didn't experience much of a trauma bond in that relationship. But later in life, I did. And that's what I want to talk about in this video. And the point of me going over my first experience is just that I want to point out that narcissistic abuse doesn't necessarily lead to a trauma bond. It doesn't necessarily lead to this kind of pain. It can, but just because it doesn't mean it's not narcissistic abuse or abuse. And every experience is different. But when I experienced the pain of breaking off a trauma bond, that was a whole new experience for me. That was something that was so overwhelming and shocking. It really shook my world and changed the way I look at everything. It's really what woke me up to stopping the repetitiveness of this, repeating this pattern over and over again of abusive relationships. But everyone's experience is different, and I just wanted to point that out. You're not necessarily going to experience a trauma bond when you're in an abusive relationship. And ironically, for me, the most abusive relationship I was in, the really bad one, was the easiest one to recover from. Whereas the abusive relationship that had good moments and good times was extremely hard to break away from. That's the one where it took me a very long time to pull myself back together. That's the one where I experienced the kind of pain and trauma that I'm going to now describe. When I first broke off this relationship that I had a trauma bond in, I was kind of in survival mode. I was kind of realizing that I was in some sort of war almost, and I needed to get out of this relationship, and I needed to really concentrate and have all my faculties together, and I couldn't really focus on pain or grief or sadness, that I needed to get out of this relationship as safely as I possibly could. So I didn't really let the pain in until the relationship was severed and I was in a safe space and it was over. And then the grief started to set in pretty quickly, and the pain really took me by surprise. I mean, I knew that I was going to be brokenhearted, but this pain was just completely overwhelming. It felt like I had lost a limb. It felt, I don't know what kind of language I can use to even do it justice. I felt like my insides were on fire. I felt like I was being seared from the inside. It was an intense, acute, emotional pain that was almost intolerable. And I guess it was grief, you could say, but it was just an extreme feeling of loss and shock. And I think a lot of it was the loss of the plans I had, of the dreams I had, of the relationship that I thought I was in. Just to lose all of that. Really, what I had lost was a fantasy of what really wasn't real, of what I really didn't have. But losing that was just so extremely painful. and there was nowhere to turn for relief. I also think that for me personally, I had really lived a life where I had a lot of really painful experiences and I had never really dealt with them. And I didn't really understand that I hadn't dealt with them. I didn't really understand what it is I had been through. Even that first relationship that I talked about earlier that was extremely emotionally abusive. I mean, it wasn't physically abusive, but the emotional abuse was very constant and very extreme. But even after experiencing that, I didn't even realize that I had been in an abusive relationship because, it wasn't a physically abusive relationship. I never thought of it as abuse. I had no concept of what I had been through until I repeated it again and again. And of course, repeating it, I found people that weren't as bad as that first relationship. So in contrast, I would think, oh, well, this is wonderful. This is great because it was so much better than that first relationship I'd had, but it was still really abusive. And I hadn't even acknowledged that first relationship was abusive. So that didn't help. But my point is, after repeating these painful, abusive relationships, I was using these relationships to cope with the pain that had built up over all those years. I was chasing after those moments of validation, those happy moments, those little acts of kindness, and the euphoric feeling that I would get in those good moments was what helped me cope with all of the pain that I had never processed or even recognized. So here I was at the end of this last relationship, and my coping mechanism was gone. This moment of euphoria that I was so used to looking for, I couldn't look for it anymore. The source of it, this person that I had this trauma bond with, was gone. And so how do I cope? Where do I go to find this feeling of euphoria? So all this pain I was in, there was no relief for it. There was nowhere to turn. There was nothing that could make me feel better. I didn't know what to do with myself other than to just sit in this excruciating pain and just try to get through every day with this unbearable pain that I didn't know how to deal with. Another thing that I had to deal with in recovering from this trauma bond was the rumination. And this was really, really hard to deal with. It was annoying isn't a strong enough word, but it was really annoying because I was absolutely obsessed with this relationship that I had just ended. I was absolutely constantly ruminating on it 24/7. I couldn't stop thinking about it. And when I say thinking about it, everywhere I went, it didn't matter if I was brushing my teeth or walking my dog, or if I was at work, or if I was pumping gas at the gas station. I was constantly thinking, like, where is he? What's he doing? Is he thinking about me? What's he doing right now? Where is he? Is that him around the corner? Is he around the corner? Is he about to call me? Is he going to try to text me? Is he looking for me? What's he doing? Where is he? And just this constant wheel that would not stop, wondering where he was, if he was thinking about me, if he was going to try to contact me. And every corner I went around, is he going to be around that corner? Is he going to be around that corner? Is that him? Is that his car? Just constant rumination and obsession. And part of me was afraid that he was going to be around the next corner, and part of me kind of wanted him around the next corner. So there was this part of me that was hoping that I would run into him, because maybe there was still some way to work things out. Maybe there was still some way to find my way back into this trauma bond and finally find that relief that I needed so much from this pain. But then, of course, the rational side of me and also the fearful side of me didn't want him to be around the next corner. So there's part of me that's hoping he's around the next corner. And then there's part of me that's scared to death that he might be around the next corner. And this was just this constant reality that I was living in. Another part of the rumination was rehearsing pretend conversations. So I was just constantly trying to find the right words to explain my pain to him, trying to find the right words to get through to him, to make him understand the pain that he had caused me, or to make him understand why the relationship actually ended, to make him understand how simple it would be to fix all of this, if he would just see the pain he had caused, if he would just see how needless, how unnecessary the abusive behavior was, how if he could just be a little nicer, none of this would be happening. We could get back together and everything would be great if he could just be a little nicer. So I became really obsessed with these conversations I kept running in my head. What am I going to say if I run into him? What's the right words that'll get through to him? I would write emails that I would never send, and I would just write and write and write obsessively, and I would keep deleting and rewriting and deleting and rewriting, trying to think of like, what's going to get through to him? What's going to make him understand? What's going to make him see? And I couldn't stop this obsessive thinking and these obsessive pretend conversations, which are another symptom of a trauma bond. I think part of what contributes to the obsession and the rumination is the unresolved anger, confusion, the invalidation, and the insistence that the narcissist has in passing all the blame onto you, and in the way that the narcissist seems confused. And in a way, they kind of are, but it's willful. The narcissist doesn't want to take any responsibility for what's happened. The narcissist refuses to acknowledge that any of it is their fault. And that is so hard to accept when you're the abuse victim and when you want so badly for this person to just recognize some really simple truths, because you're in this enormous, intolerable amount of pain. You have to live with just unbearable amounts of emotional pain. And if this other person would just recognize some simple truth and just put a little bit of effort into not being so mean, you wouldn't have to go through all this pain. All of this would go away. It's so needless. It's so pointless. But unfortunately, because of the reality of narcissism, there really is no way out of it but to go through it, because the narcissist is just not going to recognize their role in it. They're not going to change. They just don't have a reason to, for all the reasons I've explained in previous videos. But it's really hard to accept that when, from your perspective, it's so simple. It's such a simple problem that they could just fix if they just decided to. Now, the title of this video is An Ocean of Pain, and I remember, and I want to say, like, I feel really good today. Like, I feel totally healed, if there is such a thing as totally healed. I really do feel really good. I have improved my self-confidence and the way I look at life. And I mean, I feel really happy at where I am now, and I don't deal with any of this pain anymore. So that's part of why I'm making this video, is I want anyone out there that's suffering through this to know that there is an end to this pain. But the title of this video is in reference to a memory I have of the way I was trying to describe what I was feeling to other people. And I really felt like I was under the ocean. I felt like no contact, or at least ignoring all incoming messages that I was receiving and resisting the urge to re-engage in this relationship was something that I was holding on to really hard. Everything in me was screaming at me to re-engage in this relationship, but my rationality and my commitment to reality was like, I likened it unto like a rope that I was holding on to. And in this analogy in my head, I was sitting on the bottom of the ocean, just absolutely swallowed in pain, sitting on the bottom of an ocean of pain, and no contact, and refusing to respond to any of the messages that were getting through, refusing to re-engage with this relationship, was, in my mind, like holding on to a rope that was slowly pulling me up to the surface. And I could see myself being pulled to the surface of this ocean of pain, but it was an ocean. It was vast, and I couldn't even see the top. I couldn't even see the surface. And I just had to have faith that if I held on tight enough to this rope and I didn't let go, I would eventually break through the surface. I would eventually find peace and happiness again. But if I let go of this rope, if I re-engaged in the relationship, if I went back, if I gave in to this temptation, this urge I had, that I would sink right back down to the bottom of the ocean. And when I decided to hold back onto that rope again, I would have to start all over at my ascent to the top. Now, in reality, I don't think that's quite true. I think that if you do slip up, if you do re-engage in the relationship, or if you break no contact, I don't think you have to start all over again, but of course you do get set back quite a bit, and there's really no point in doing it, because that's all that really happens at the end of the day, is your healing is sent back. That's where the name of the video comes from, is the way that I actually felt. I really felt like I was buried in an ocean of pain, and I just want anyone out there that's feeling that way to know that I did eventually break the surface, and it was absolutely 100% worth all of the pain I experienced. Now, this video is going a little long, but I also want to talk about other sorts of pain that I had to deal with. I had a loss of joy and a loss of purpose, and I no longer felt excited about things. And I know this sounds like depression. I think that there was a bit of depression that I experienced, although I wasn't officially diagnosed with depression, but just this inability to feel excited or joyful about anything. I just didn't feel happy about anything. I didn't really care about anything, things that I used to really enjoy. I no longer listened to music, and I used to really, really love listening to music, and I just didn't see the point in listening to music anymore. And I don't really like talking about this, but I also did have moments where I would think about, I gotta be careful with my language, about ending everything in a permanent way. I never seriously considered doing that, but I did definitely have many moments where I would think about how that would be a way out, that would end this pain. And it really made me develop empathy for people that do decide to do that, because I could feel this pain and there was nowhere to run from it. There was no escape. There was no way to cope with this pain other than to just sit and feel this pain. So I came to understand why people get to the point where they decide to do that. But I do want to say I'm very, 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 very glad that I didn't give in to the pain of the moment and take that solution, because everything I went through eventually was worth where I've arrived at. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about what I did to overcome this, how I healed, what helped and what didn't. But I want to emphasize that everybody's journey is different, and some things are going to help some people that are not helpful for others. And I also want to say that I remember when I was going through this, I remember looking for something that was going to help me feel better. And as much as I looked, it was really hard for me to accept, but I can look back and now easily accept and understand that there is nothing that's just going to make all the pain go away right away. Nothing's going to heal you more than time. But time will heal you if you continually go through the healing process. And I think what really helped me was not giving up. I never gave up. I stuck to no contact. It's a long story, but I did have a brief period where I kind of broke it a little bit. That's a long story I'm not going to get into. But for the most part, I'm pretty happy with how well I did at sticking to no contact. And that was a huge part of healing. If you are still re-engaging with arguments and you're still trying to get your point across, or you're going back to this person and trying to work on the relationship, I mean, you can't heal if you're continually exposing yourself to the trauma and the trauma bond. I just don't see any way that you can heal. I mean, if you have kids with somebody that you are in this kind of relationship with. I think you can over time practice methods of detaching and not reacting and not engaging. I think that would be really difficult, but definitely possible to do. And it might take a little longer to heal in that kind of situation, but I still think it's possible after you learn to stop engaging and stop arguing and stop reacting to their provocations. Now, back to what helped me heal. I think the most useful thing that I did that helped me the most was meditation. I meditated every night before I would go to sleep. And I tried all different sorts of meditation, mainly just guided meditations that were free on YouTube. There's lots of people out there that have free guided meditations. And then I did some of my own. I would just have like meditation music and I would do my own meditations. So I experimented with a lot of different meditations. And I really think that helped keep me grounded. It helped keep me focused on the goal of breaking this trauma bond and of recovering from this pain. It didn't cure my pain. It didn't make the pain go away, but it helped me cope. It helped me keep my feet on the ground. I really feel like meditation was the single most important thing that I did. But again, if you practice meditation, it's not some magic cure-all. It's not going to just make your pain go away. In fact, some of the meditations I practiced or that I tried out actually made me experience a lot more pain, but that was just trial and error. Some methods of meditation worked better for me than others. Journaling also helped me a lot because journaling helped me organize my thoughts. And it also helped me put my experience down in black and white where I could look at it, and it helped me continue to make rational decisions when I was in a very irrational state of mind. So journaling was very helpful in helping me keep focus on the reality that I was in. It was also really helpful for me to engage in public forums in which narcissistic abuse was being discussed. And I know that there is a point where this can be too much and where it can actually keep you focused on something that maybe you should start steering away from. But I think that if you're in the middle of recovery from a trauma bond and you're in the extreme pain that I described, I think that it can be a lifeline. And I think that just being in a community where people understand your experience and they're talking about it is something, for me, for a period of time, is really what helped keep me sane and helped keep me feeling not so alone. I think it was an extremely integral part of my healing. But yeah, there is a point where you need to kind of stop and pull away from it. And I think that if you're really dedicated to healing, I think you'll know where that point is. I think it's okay to use that as a crutch to help you get through the hard parts and to feel like there's a community of support there and that you're not alone in this. So that was a huge part of my healing. Now, I did, after I think about a year into this, and I am purposefully not going to tell you how long it took me to feel like I had recovered and healed, because I don't want to discourage anybody. It took a long time, and hopefully it doesn't take people as long as it took me, but I'm not even going to tell you how long it took me. But a year into it is when I finally started professional therapy, and that helped too. That was another huge part of healing. And the single most important thing or helpful thing that my therapist helped me with was I did this thing where I would, and I guess that maybe I should have talked about this earlier, but I would have these meltdowns. I would have these emotional meltdowns. I had heard a YouTube video of somebody talking about all the, recovering from narcissistic abuse. And this person was insistent on really feeling your emotions and not holding anything back. And if you feel like you're in pain, if you feel like crying, just cry. Just let all these emotions come to the surface and don't hold them back at all. So with that philosophy in mind, every time I felt like I was going to have an emotional meltdown, unless I was like at work or at the grocery store, I would allow myself to have these emotional meltdowns. And I did, especially if I was in my car or which is not safe, but if I was in my car or if I was alone in my bedroom, I would have extreme emotional meltdowns, and sometimes I would just cry and even scream for like an hour, just nonstop. It felt like I was vomiting up emotions that there was no end to. Just, it's like vomiting and there's no end to it. It just keeps coming and coming and coming. And I did this with a mentality of thinking, if I cry and scream enough, all this pain is going to be purged somehow. I'm eventually going to run out of pain. I'm eventually going to purge it from myself. But my therapist helped me understand that's actually not how it works. And it's okay to cry, of course. It's okay to have these meltdowns, but there's an end to it. There's a point where it's like, okay, you've cried enough. You can stop and say, that's enough. I need to distract myself. I've recognized the emotions. I'm not hiding these emotions. I'm not oppressing them. I'm not finding something to distract me from feeling what I feel, but I've recognized this pain. I've had my cry. I understand what I'm feeling. I'm not hiding from it. I don't need to sit and cry and cry and cry and cry until I don't feel like crying anymore. It's okay to stop and find something to distract yourself. It's okay to stop crying and say, that's enough. Let's do something else. That was the most helpful thing that my therapist taught me. And I really think that that was one of the most helpful things that actually helped me find an end where this pain actually started to ease up. I think that my idea of just crying and crying and crying and screaming until I didn't feel like crying anymore, I think that actually was prolonging the pain, prolonging this healing process, and keeping me stuck in this place where I was just feeding into this pain so much. So I just wanted to pass that on if anybody else could relate to that. It's okay to cry, and of course it's okay to acknowledge these horrible, painful feelings that you're feeling, but it's also okay to say, okay, that's enough. I don't need to cry anymore. I'm going to distract myself. I'm going to watch a TV show that I want to watch, or I'm going to find a hobby, or I'm going to do something to stop thinking about this. I've acknowledged it enough. So for me, that was probably the most helpful thing as far as something that actually helped me start to heal a little bit faster. So in making this video, I wanted to help connect with anybody out there that can relate to this, anybody that's in this kind of pain. I just thought it was important that you can know that there is an end to it, and that all of this pain is worth it. And there isn't some great solution. There's not a one-size-fits-all kind of solution that you're going to be able to engage in and it's just going to make this pain go away. Unfortunately, there is a period of time that you just have to tolerate it. You just have to get through it, find your own little ways of coping with this pain as you pass through it, and have faith that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, that if you hold on to that rope of no contact and your commitment to healing yourself, you will be pulled to the surface eventually. Another important part of this is really spending this time that you're in so much pain, spending this time delving into yourself and really trying to figure out what it was that made you vulnerable to this in the first place, and the patterns that you've maybe engaged in that's caused you to re-engage, as I did, repetitively in abusive relationships, to really get to know yourself and to really get to understand how it is that you've reacted to narcissistic people, and to really get to understand what you can do in the future to prevent this. What do healthy relationships actually look like? What is it that you actually want in a partner? What's going to really make you happy in a relationship versus what's going to give you these short little bursts of euphoria? Really spend this time self-reflecting instead of ruminating and obsessing over how you can try to salvage this horrible relationship that you've escaped. And I promise you, if you commit to your healing and commit to yourself, what's really important is healing yourself and understanding what you really deserve, and recognizing your self-worth, you will recover. This pain does have an end to it. And I mean, it really has an end. I know there was a period of time where I believed or I thought that it would always hurt and that I would just have to learn to live with it. And yeah, I mean, there's certain aspects of it that there's still pieces of pain, but it's not like you have to live in pain for the rest of your life. There is an end to it. There is a place where you will find joy again, and you will find purpose in more meaningful things rather than in illusions. You will find excitement again. You will find real love and completely relearn your whole idea of what that even means. Commit to yourself, commit to reality, have faith, and you will recover. You will find your way out of this pain. If you're looking for a way to support my channel and you've been considering professional therapy, BetterHelp is offering 10% off of your first month of service if you sign up using the link below in my description. And if you sign up using the link below in my description, I'll get a one-time commission. So that'll help me out, and it'll help you out as well if that's something that you've been considering. I hope this helps. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and comment below any ideas you have for me for future videos. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you like this video and you would like to see more like it in the future. Until next time, thanks. Bye.